You care about data protection, stop scrolling for a second. Now, American data protection specifically, mostly non existent, right? Well, wrong. Because in the past 2 months, there have been 5 states to pass comprehensive data privacy laws. Before 2023, there were only 5 states that had laws at all. And now we're up to 10, and we have the momentum that's poised to continue through the rest of the year. Now, not all these laws are GDP light. A lot of them are business friendly, and those business friendly factors have been a major discussion in how to pass anything, which is what's taken so long for a lot of these states to get legislation on the books. But you got to start somewhere. Now, the stalwarts you probably know, so California, Virginia, Connecticut, Colorado, and Utah. But this newest collection of states that's passed laws in 2023 will definitely surprise you. So, ready. We have Iowa, Indiana, Tennessee, Montana, and Texas, which is currently awaiting governor's signature, but is definitely poised to become the 10th state with legislation. And even a state like Florida is very close to passing legislation in the coming months. Now, if you're not an American, that might be a little bit confusing, that collection of states. You know, Iowa is basically famous for corn and nothing else. Sorry, Iowa. But there's an important part in there in that all of those states lean conservative. Now, that's in stark contrast to the first batch of states that passed these laws. And that shows that this is a bipartisan issue. And if that's true, we can see a lot more progress being made on this front in the near future. Now, while the foundations of these 5 new laws are all pretty similar, they have their unique traits and aspects that make it seem like a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to be the way forward for the American data privacy landscape. So let's get into the elements and see what stands out in each of these bills. So, Iowa, 6th on the map, passing their law in late March. And not to pick on them, but their bill is the least people friendly, so as a result, the least effective. It doesn't require any type of processing record activity or impact assessment and gives crazy lenient timelines to businesses. It's got a 90-day cure period for potential violations and give businesses 90 days to respond to DSRs. That's double what California and Virginia give and 3 times as long as what the GDPR gives. So if you run into trouble with Iowa's new law, you'll only have yourself to blame. Indiana's up next, and unfortunately for them, Iowa seems to have stolen their acronym, ICDPA. So we'll see what we end up calling Indiana's law in the long term. But anyway, Indiana is setting an extremely long runway for businesses as their law is not set to take effect until January 1st, 2026, which is way later than any of these new state level laws. Indiana's bill is full of exemptions and opt-outs just like Virginia's, which it's quite similar to overall, and actually gives a decent and clear breakdown of obligations that reads similar to the GDPR principles. Now, Tennessee, the only 10 I see, jumping into the fray with TIPA, so a pretty good acronym, and TIPA passed in late April. TIPA is heavily modeled on the VCDPA as well, a recurring theme, but it does have some stark differences from both Virginia's law and Indiana's law. First off, it's going to apply to much fewer businesses since the compliance threshold is $25 million in annual revenue and processing data of more than 175,000 state residents. Now, this double requirement of both the revenue threshold and the applicability for people is unique to Tennessee, as other state laws typically work on an either or model, profit, or a large amount of data processing. So Tennessee using both, and with an increased threshold of 175,000 state residents instead of the normal 100,000 most other state bills use. Not many people are going to end up having to comply with this at all. Now, TIPA also has an exemption for licensed insurance companies, the first of its kind, and it has inclusions for companies that reasonably conform to the NIST privacy framework. So what does that mean? Considering NIST seeks to provide a flexible way for organizations to identify and manage risks within diverse environments, this could end up meaning that any amount of compliant behavior satisfies as a defense. Again, another reason that TIPA will probably end up with very little bite behind it. Montana's law has done a lot of things right and actually looks a lot like Connecticut's law. Firstly, the applicability threshold has been lowered to just 50,000 state residents. Since the typical 100,000 wouldn't work well in a state as sparsely populated as Montana is, there are more cows than people, so they had to lower it. Otherwise, nothing would have worked out well. Next, the bill features a sunset right to cure. Again, the initial right to cure is 60 days, but that does go away, so businesses won't have an indefinite security blanket if they are uncompliant. And Montana also features universal opt out mechanisms that don't require individual verification, and they have the right to revoke consent, something not even featured in California's privacy law. So that is a very good step forward for Montana. They want to get this moving too, so the effective date is October 1st, 2024. That's before both Iowa and Indiana's laws take effect. But again, the sunset right to cure doesn't happen until 2026. There's a little bit of a buffer zone. Now, lastly, of the five, we have Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. The Texas Data Privacy and Security Act, or TDPSA, that just passed very recently after the bill was introduced in February, so they got it done in one state session. Most of what's in the TDPSA aligns with the other bills coming out, with opt-outs rather than opt-ins, $7,500 fines per violation, Attorney General-led enforcement, mandatory data protection assessments, again with the exception of Iowa for some reason. And of course, the TDPSA also has special requirements for handling and disclosing the processing of sensitive data. Now, most of note here is the March 1st, 2024 effect date. That's the earliest of the bunch, even though Texas is last to pass. And that's a clear sign that the state wants to have some ground covered as more tech moves into the state. Now, also of note, we have Florida. Their bill is on the 1 yard line, so there'll be big news on that soon, probably, especially with how busy the Florida legislature has been in recent months. And it seems that Oklahoma and New Hampshire, both of which have active bills in cross committee at the moment, could get us up to 13 states with data privacy laws by the end of 2023.